I cannot overstate how much prayer really is the primary fuel for the pipeline. All the strategy in the world will not accomplish more than praying to the God who oversees everything in the world. It really feels like in the last year, after 2 years of praying every single day, God just said yes. My bucket's not big enough to catch all of the rain of God saying yes to the prayers. You have to pray for it if you want to see God do it. And he can do way more than you're even asking for.
Welcome to the Worship Ministry Training Podcast, a monthly podcast for worship leaders who are serious about growing in their craft and calling. My name is Alex, fellow worship leader. Super stoked you're here. And if you're a new listener, I'm going to encourage you to hit that subscribe button because every single month, I'm going to give you helpful, practical guidance that you can immediately implement into your ministry. Hit that subscribe button and then go back through the past 9 years of episodes and binge listen your way to a healthier ministry. And if you're someone who is really serious about growing as a worship leader, I'm going to point you to the Worship Ministry Training Academy. What is the Academy? It's an online training platform that will give you everything you need to build a thriving worship ministry. You'll get 10 in-depth courses on topics like set building, team building, musical excellence, vocal technique, and more. You'll get live monthly training workshops on topics that are relevant to you. You'll get exclusive expert interviews with some of the best worship leaders in the world. You'll get done-for-you ministry admin systems and audition process, onboarding documents, team training materials, and even team discipleship materials. We will take care of you so you can focus on leading your team. If that sounds like something that would be of help to you, you can try the Worship Ministry Training Academy for just $1 by going to worshipministrytraining.com. Sign up today for your $1 trial, and I hope to see you inside of the Academy. All right, let's get into today's episode. So today we are talking about the very important topic of raising up more worship leaders, because I don't know about you, but I need a break sometimes. You probably need a break sometimes. And if we just grind ourselves into dust, we're going to burn out and be fruitless and not very fun to be around. Probably grumpy, maybe grumpy with our families. And so we want to raise up more worship leaders selfishly for ourselves, but also for our churches. And the deeper I get into the worship training world, the more I realize there are not enough qualified worship leaders in the world. And I have large companies coming to me saying, we need you to help us find worship leaders for all these churches that are looking for worship leaders. And so there is a massive glut of worship leaders. And I'm praying that this podcast episode helps all of us to get motivated to train up more worship leaders from within our own church. Because one, your church is going to benefit, but two, that person's going to benefit. And then three, that person might go out and help a new church that needs a worship leader. And so you're actually helping advance the kingdom of God. And so my hope today, as I introduce our wonderful guest here in a second, is that you would get a vision for developing more worship leaders at your church and that you would learn the practical principles for how you can do that. And so I'm really excited to bring onto the screen my friend, Dalton Shaffer, who's actually also in the Academy with us. So it's really nice to have you here on the podcast. Good to meet you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Cool. So you are out in Iowa at a church called Candeo. Tell us just a little bit about the church, but more, I kind of want you just to introduce this training program that you've developed there. So like a little bit about the church and then a sweeping overview of what you're doing.
Yeah. So Candeo Church was planted in Cedar Falls, Iowa. We're in a college town. We were planted 10 years ago, so we just got to celebrate our 10-year anniversary. And in the last 10 years, we've planted 3 churches. We're about to plant our 4th this summer. Alongside that, we've sent staff out to other churches that we've helped plant. So like the first year I was on staff, they had planted a church 2 weeks before I got here. That next summer, we helped plant 2 more churches. And it just is kind of the ethos of our community and our whole network. We're part of a network called the SALT Network, about 30 churches, all in college towns. Of roughly 10,000 or more college students, that's kind of our target zones. There's about 403 major university centers in North America that we're trying to plant in, and another 100 globally. A lot of people would see our church and our network and they would think like, oh man, they're about college students. And so they plant churches to reach college students. And that's true. But I would actually say we're about church planting, and we have found college ministry to be such a fruitful place, and college students are the most unreached people group in America. And every year you get more of them. So even if your city has 10,000 college students, well, every 4 years, that's a whole new set of 10,000. It's not the same 10,000. And so it's just a really fruitful place to do ministry. And so we go after college students because we know that they're going somewhere And our hope is that they're going to go on mission. And I had a unique burden to help raise up worship leaders. So my wife and I had prayed for quite a while and felt like the Lord had kind of put on our heart college students, church planting, and training worship leaders for those church plants. And so when I got connected to the network, it felt like the perfect match. And they weren't really doing anything to train worship leaders for those church plants. And so we came in, we kind of started just praying and asking the Lord, like, okay, what could this look like? And we kind of developed a pipeline for training worship leaders. So I have, like, as we're talking right now, one of my worship leaders is in a car driving to West Lafayette, Indiana, to lead worship this weekend at a church plant where hopefully she'll accept a job if they offer it after this weekend, and she'll move to be the worship leader for that church plant. And so, yeah, I mean, the overview of the pipeline is we have a youth group, we have a college ministry, and our college ministry is larger proportionately. So we're running 400, 500 sometimes on a Thursday night. Our Sunday mornings, we might run 1,000. And so it's a lot of college students proportionate to how large our church is. And we kind of use those as just context for worship leaders. So our staff structure is me. I have a tech guy that's on staff with me. Under me as a college worship leader. And then I have a couple of interns, a tech intern and a couple of worship interns. And then we have, lay leaders too that we're trying to train. And so I just was trying to figure out, like, how can I equip people? I want our youth to have great worship. I want college to have great worship. How can I help equip people to do that? And I just started kind of writing down everything that I do and how I think about things, and realized that I wanted to put together like a 52-week course. And that's really hard. It's really hard to go through 52 weeks of content. And so I actually pared it back to 6 weeks. And we kind of just, formulated like a 6-week pathway that I think jumpstarts people into knowing how to lead. And we can talk more about that. If there's more you want to kind of dig into that.
Yes, thank you. And just so that our listeners can get a sense for how successful it's been, how many worship leaders have you pushed through this process and have sent out? Or maybe not sent out, but have raised up even for within?
Yeah. So just context, I've only been here 2.5 years. So we're sending 2 this year. We sent another worship leader out last year who took a part-time role at a church that, they just don't have a full-time staff role. And then another worship leader who moved to Syracuse to take a full-time church plant worship role. And so, by the end of this year, I'll have been 4 sent out. I've taken 10 people through it. 2 of those are not a part of our church. They're actually lay leaders at another church plant in our network. And so, it's about, half of them go on, and some of them just become great volunteers. Like, some of them are never going to lead the band and lead the whole thing. But we found this, at least in-house with the people we're taking through here at Candeo, that, man, they come out the other side better leaders, more dynamic, maybe able to do some speaking from stage, and in a pinch, maybe could actually lead the thing if the leader got sick, but they don't quite have the desire to lead the whole thing on their own. And so, it's 6 weeks. And so last night I finished a round of 6 weeks with 2 leaders from another church. Next Wednesday, I start another round of 6 weeks with 3 more people here. 2 of those are going to come on as interns in the fall. And hopefully 2 years after that, they might come on staff. And then 2 to 3 years after that, they'll go on church plant. So the pipeline of it's a 6-week course, but it pulls them into a process, at least in-house, of what we're usually saying is going to be 4, 5, 6 years of training. So the worship leader that's in Indiana today, this is our 3rd year working together. She's gone through that 6-week thing multiple times. She's helped teach it. She's going to help teach it this next round. And so when she launches out, hopefully she'll take that with her, and she's already been teaching it. And day 1, she'll turn around and recruit a college student, take them through it, and hopefully she'll have another worship leader as soon as she hits the ground there. So
that's amazing. It's a very duplicatable process, and I love that. And I think what I want to highlight a few things, but first of all is that you just did it. You're like, we got to do this. What can I teach? 52 weeks, that's a lot. Okay, 6 weeks. And then you're just figuring it out as you go. And I think the thing I want to encourage the worship leaders watching or listening is that you guys can do this at your church. You don't have to be at a big church. You don't have to be in a mega church that's got everything figured out. You can actually start to just figure it out. But the key is the desire. Do you desire to train up worship leaders? Do you desire to pass on the mantle of worship leading to others, whether kids in the youth band or other peers your age? because a lot of people don't know this, but worship ministry training started 10 years ago out of me teaching 3 other worship leaders at my church how I do what I do. So I just would come up with a lesson, give it to them, talk about it. And then I was like, wow, I have like 10 lessons here. Maybe I'll just start reading it into a microphone and putting it out there on the internet. And that's how the podcast started. But the point was, like, I was in a church of 350 people maybe. And I was like, all right, there are 3 people here who have some potential. Let's train them. And my encouragement is just that all of us can do this. And it's about taking intentionality. And it might even be borrowing material, like maybe Dalton will let us borrow some of his material or the academy material. And you borrow the material and you just talk about it with your worship leaders. You don't even have to create the material, but the desire has to be there and should be there. And we kind of covered why early in the introduction for yourself, for your church, and for the person. But let's talk a little bit more about this program. So it's a 6-week program. Let's talk about, how do you identify people to get involved? What are you looking for? What should the worship leaders watching or listening be looking for in potential candidates?
Yeah, I think sometimes we think like, who's called to do it? And it's like so hard to navigate, like, okay, who are the right people? And I think about myself, I think sometimes like if I had 20-year-old Dalton in front of me, I would go, no, he's not the one. And so I try to like broaden like who might be willing to do this. But there's 4 things that I'm always thinking through, which is passion, ability, opportunity, and availability. So are they passionate about it? Like, do they actually want to do it? So that's like really key at the start. Like, if you don't want to do it, I'm not going to waste my time, right? It's like, you have to want to do it. Ability. Do you have some of the basic abilities it's going to take to be a worship leader? Can you sing? Can you, talk in front of people? You don't have to be good at it yet, but at least is there that willingness to grow in it? A lot of times I'm also looking for an instrumentalist. I actually make all of my, at least if you come on as an intern, if you don't know how to play guitar when you start, we're going to teach you how to play guitar, because I do foresee a world where hopefully one day you're on a church plant and you might be the only one leading. So yeah, you got passion, ability, opportunity. Sometimes we just have to look at what's in front of us and go, I don't have any more spots. We're maxed out. I've got how many worship leaders going through it right now? It's like, I just don't have any more capacity to bring on another. And that might help like determine if it's the right next step for them. And then availability. How available are they to do it? So for us, we kind of have a set time. Our class almost always, I say almost because, there's some flexibility, but almost always meets at 5:00 on Wednesdays, 5 p.m. It's usually enough time for someone if they're like working a job to make it here after work. But the reason we do 5:00 on Wednesdays is because that's actually when our youth group meets to rehearse. And so because the youth group meets at that time, we're like, hey, let's meet at the same time, because your next step after this 6-week thing is actually to jump in and do everything we taught you at youth group. You're going to plan the youth group set. You're going to plan a shepherding moment for the youth group band. Like, you're going to do all this in youth group. So if you're not free during that time, we're not going to make a new time to meet with you, because I actually need you to go do that. Unless you're exceptionally gifted already, and I'm confident you could do these in one of our other contexts, we want to make that lowest, easiest entry point where everybody kind of funnels through first. And so that would be like some just 4 things to think through: passion, ability, opportunity, and availability as you're trying to identify someone.
So everybody listening, think about your crew around you. Is there anyone that looks like that? And it doesn't have to be a specific age category. Is there anyone? I've seen some really gifted older worship leaders. We always tend to focus on raising up the young people, which is great. But I know some of you don't have that in your church. You're like, there are no young people in my church. Okay, but in the 40 age category, 50, 60, even 70, we have a few worship leaders in the academy that are like almost 70 and they're crushing it. And so I love that. I love that you are being strategic with your time. So you're doing it at the same time as youth group, and there's reasons for that. One of the reasons is just because you're probably already at church. So I want everybody to think strategically about this. You don't have to add another night of the week into your calendar. Is there a time where you're already at church and you could just add a 30-minute training thing? So one of the academy members yesterday on our monthly live team building class is Teresa, and she was sharing about 30 minutes before rehearsal, they do the 15-minute worship ministry training Devo, and then they do 15 minutes of scales and musical ear training. And
Nice.
she started doing this because they're already there. They're already at church. So she just started training them in that time slot where they're already coming to church. And she said the growth has been phenomenal over the last few months. And so I love that you're tacking this onto a time slot where you're already at church. So I want to highlight that as well. I also love that you are giving them training, they're learning the practicals, but then you're giving them an opportunity to express and practice what they're learning in youth group. I'd love to hear more about the 6 key lessons that you've focused on. Like 52 weeks, you're like, no, okay, if I can only teach people this many things, what would I teach them? So what are the 6 keys?
Yeah. Well, there's a few things. One, I would say the reason we pared it down so much is so that it could be reproducible in contexts where you don't have college students and you don't have staff. 6 weeks, anybody can give 6 weeks in a row to an equipping class if they want to do it. And so that's why we did that. The 6 things that we kind of identified is 1, character over competency, because we just believe that as a worship leader, the 2% of competency that happens on the stage is what gets you hired, but the 98% that's off the stage is what gets you fired. And so we actually just believe character matters more. We'll often say who you are in Christ matters more than what you can do for Christ. And so we start with character over competency. We move into how to develop a philosophy of worship. And then we talk about gospel-shaped service planning. So we kind of teach people a certain kind of way of planning a liturgy or a worship service that is shaped by the gospel. We talk about how to arrange the band and lead rehearsals. That'd be the 4th week. The 5th week is on speaking moments. And then the last week is on postures of worship and kind of like a biblical foundations for postures of worship and stage presence.
Dang, so those are all so
things.
good. Yeah. Now, just curious, if you could add a 7th, do you feel like there's anything there that's missing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so I have a 12-week version of this too that I would do if I was like leading a little cohort for someone else's church. And so some of the other things that we would add is a week on spiritual disciplines. I would take that character over competency and I would elaborate that using a resource like Spiritual Disciplines for the Christian Life by Donald Whitney, something like that. And like maybe find like 2 or 3 of the best chapters and go in every week there is pre-work that you have to like read or listen to podcasts. So you come with, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour of pre-work. We do a 90-minute session and there's homework at the end. And the next week you go through the homework. So maybe you plan a set or you work out some arrangement notes or you prepare a speaking moment or something like that. And so it ends up being a couple hour commitment every week. But if you can give about 2 hours of your week to it, you can get it done. But I would say that for leaders, like if I'm sending out a worship leader to a church plant, if they've been on staff with me, maybe 2 years in an internship and then 2 years on staff, they're going to catch a lot of this without needing a session. But I would do a session on how to lead a value-driven culture for your worship team. And then a third one would be like administrative structural leadership. Yeah, so there's a number of things that are really practical, I think. I don't do those here because they learn that naturally through I have weekly meetings once you're an intern or on staff. But yeah, there's a number of other things that I would add to it.
I love it. And just to reiterate what you shared so that everybody can kind of think through these boxes is like you said, pre-work, watch this, listen to this, read this, 90-minute teaching session, discussion in person at the same time as youth group, and then homework after the fact. Now go do what you just learned. I mean, that's kind of like regular school, right? Yeah. Now, I'd love to talk with you because sometimes worship leaders can feel already overwhelmed with like, oh, I have a million things to do. I'm not even a full-time worship leader. I do this as a volunteer. But the content. So obviously you had to sit down and you had to come up with teachings for each of these 6 topics. But did you start with a minimum viable product? Meaning, did you just go, okay, I'm just going to sit down for 40 minutes and write what I can, put it on a nice formatted sheet, and this is version 1? Because I think a lot of worship leaders get like, I got to get it all perfect. It's got to be super polished, but it's actually, 100%. No, you just need to start and then you iterate as you do it and you learn what you forgot to put in there. So you want to share about your content process?
Yeah. The first year so I'm just going to use her name. Anna is this worship leader I keep referring to. Anna was my intern 3 years ago. And the first year of her internship was terrible. I was like, man, I'm still learning how to do this. I want to train you. And it was just discussion. It was like every week, like, hey, what do you want to talk about? What do you need to learn? And I was like, okay, that's not going to work next year. So the next year, I'm like, okay, I'm going to write out predetermined topics. We start going through that. So this was last year. And I maybe like wrote up my first version of, philosophy of worship. And basically what we did is I just kind of read a chapter. Maybe we talked through a chapter and I just started writing down some of the stuff we talked about. And then I took another crew through it and she was with me and we just began typing what I was saying. And so now that I've been through that teaching like 4 times, and she's helped me so much with this, I owe a lot of how successful this thing is working for us to Anna Hoynes. But she'll sit in the session while I'm teaching it and in real time in the Google Doc, delete stuff that I skipped and write in new stuff I said if it's better than what's in there. And so it's been updated. I finished one session once and it said 113 edits to this document was made. She changed 113 things in the document while I was teaching it live.
Wow.
And she's done that for me 4 times now. And so what we have now is quite good compared to what we started with. But it started as just saying, I just am trying to write down what I want to say. And so now it's a manuscript. I actually read it off. I no longer am trying to just teach it on the fly. I'm actually reading a manuscript when I go through it so that I say everything that we want to say in the way that we've kind of crafted to be the best way to say it. But yeah, I mean, it's literally changed every time we've taught it.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. You don't have to have it all figured out, guys. Just start. If you believe you're called to raise up worship leaders in your church, borrow content, read a book, whatever. Just get some people interested together and go. And then iterate as you learn. That's just the best way to move forward. And by the way, Anna sounds awesome. And she sounds like your personal AI bot who's listening and updating all your stuff. But no offense, Anna. So first step, identify good candidates. Second step, invite them into a 6-week process. I'm not sure if there's anything else we need to cover in that 6-week process. I'll ask a few follow-up questions. Third step is after they finish that process, they get plugged into youth band or an appropriate level of service. If they're super gifted, they go right to main stage or whatever. And then lastly, some of those people, you say, hey, you join my internship program. And why don't you describe the internship program? Because that can sound intimidating, but my guess is they're just kind of there helping. And obviously college students have more free time and all that stuff, but share about that fourth step.
Yeah. So we would see the internship program as a place where people can come and discern. It's about 10 hours a week worth of work. And that time is split between planning sets, prepping for youth group, leading at youth group, and then doing feedback. So a culture of feedback, I think, is critical for this to work. Every time someone leads in our context, we either chat or set up a lunch to meet and talk about it. But we're always going to ask the questions, okay, what went really well that we can celebrate and what can we grow in and do better? Even our Sunday band, we do this every Sunday after the morning run through before service, 15 minutes, 5 minutes of celebrating each other. And we're clapping and dude, that was amazing when you did that. I love, we're just celebrating what we see that's going really well. 5 minutes of, hey, what can we actually grow in and do better as we head out? Maybe we were just going through the motions this morning, but we were kind of disconnected. We're just kind of playing the right notes, but we weren't really, we try to have a culture of worship. We don't worship when people get in the room. We worship when God's in the room, and God's always in the room. So we worship during rehearsal, but we were just kind of going through the motions. So someone might say that, or we got off the click here, or we missed a note here. And then we spend 5 minutes praying, and that's our 15-minute before service, how we spend our time. So we have that culture of feedback. So that's always happening. So if we pull someone in, so I offered an internship to someone last week. It's someone who, through being a part of our team, has identified personally that they feel like they may be called to ministry. They're wrestling through a call to ministry, and we want to help them discern that. It's someone we've already identified has a clear expression of skill in the area of worship ministry and a high character. And those are the things we're really looking for, a willing heart, the ability. It's those same 4 things we talked about. And so, the internship primarily looks like taking what we would say is ownership or co-ownership of a particular context of our worship ministry, most often youth. So they'll come, they're hopefully, Lord willing, there will be 2 interns and they'll co-lead youth. So we do youth worship 3 times a month. One of them will lead by themselves the first week, one will lead by themselves the second week, and then they'll lead together the third week. And that's going to be like kind of how they lead youth. Then they'll also serve on our college team because they're college age people. One of them actually works full time, and one's a student and a D1 track athlete. But it's like, hopefully they have time to do that. And it makes it easier if they're co-leading the youth. And then they'll serve kind of regularly at Salt Company, which is our college ministry, and then on Sundays. And so, yeah, I mean, they'll be the ones in charge of planning the sets, planning shepherding moments, and they'll get, evaluated. Like one person on our team will be giving feedback to their shepherding moment. I do the training during youth group a lot of times, so I'm not always in here for rehearsal, but I finish before the service and I'll come in and watch the service. Because when they finish music, I got 20 minutes to set up the stage for my rehearsal. So it's just kind of really efficient back to back to back. But I'll like watch the shepherding moment and give feedback. I'll give feedback to how the band was sounding. And a lot of times that feedback will happen during that 20-minute setup. It's just immediate feedback right when they finish. And they'll do that for 1 to 2 years. And then as people go through that, usually they'll either discern, man, I've got a real gifting for this and a real passion for this. And I want to take my next step, which would look like coming on as like a resident full time with our college ministry as a worship leader, which is what Anna did. And then through that process, then it's looking at church planting. And I talk about church planting all the time. Every team event we do, I just constantly say like, hey, we're praying. Yeah, we talked about this. My 10:02 alarm went off right before we hopped on this because here in Iowa, it was, we hopped on right around 10. But 10:02, Luke 10:2, we pray to the Lord of the harvest to raise up laborers. We pray for it every day. And then we identify people, we call them to it, and we celebrate going. Like we celebrate going. Like going is for us like one of the greatest gifts because we've received something so great. And I think that's actually part of the culture of raising up worship leaders for us is that people are constantly catching a vision for what they could do if they were raised up, far beyond filling in once every 8 weeks or something like that. And that's a beautiful thing. Filling in once every week is a gift. And that's an amazing calling. And we should celebrate that too. But I think when we start to catch a bigger vision of like, hey, I actually think you could take my job. And man, worship leaders are terrified because we're so insecure. I don't know about you. Maybe I'm the only one.
I am.
We are so insecure. And like when you get someone underneath you who's more talented than you, you start to like fear them or like you're like, oh, I don't want them to take my job. Church planting is the solution to worship leaders' insecurities. I love it. When I get a guy under me who's better than me, that's like every church in the network is like, how can we hire him? There is unlimited opportunities for those people to go and take my job somewhere else where I don't then lose my job. And so,
right.
Man, I'm totally bought into the sending, seeing people raised up. But yeah, so that internship is just like that 10-hour a week. It doesn't pay a ton, but it pays enough to compensate them for their time. And I think you could do this in unpaid. Like I have lay leaders who don't get paid, who worship lead. Like this month, I only led one Sunday this month. Most months I'll probably lead 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 5. But yeah, I mean, we have lay leaders too. It's not all just like through paid staff and interns and stuff like that. So
yeah, that's very helpful because now we see the full progression from identifying to sending. There is this almost 3-year process probably. And that's probably what it takes for somebody to be ready to go out and like help with the church plant or lead. Mm-hmm. And I think people might feel discouraged about that number, but if you start and you just keep repeating the process, eventually your pipeline's like, when you turn on a hose and at first it sputters, it's like because all the air has to come out and then the water starts flowing. Like that's what happens with this pipeline is like, the first year or two, you're just going to have like a trickle or a couple people popping through, or it's going to be kind of sketchy or weird or not that great. But if you keep doing the right activities, you'll start to see all this water flowing out the end of the hose pretty soon. And now you have this constant stream where you're actually watering the garden of God. I'm sorry, this analogy kept going, but so I just want to encourage worship leaders to not lose heart in like realizing that this is a very long process to build somebody up from total newbie to actual qualified worship leader, but it's so worth it and so valuable. And then eventually, if you keep doing it on a regular basis, you don't have this lag time because you're just constantly seeing people being sent out and you're like, wow. And so I love that. And I love that you're calling out the best in others. And I always tell young people, like, you could take my job one day. You should take my job one day. Or you might be called to a church to plant a church or like be a worship pastor at another church. I see this gifting in you. And so worship leaders, like, let's not be so myopic about like, it's just about me and my guitar and my little stage and my team. It's like, no, let's see what God has for other people under our care.
Yeah,
I'm getting some
really
great
good.
questions coming in from the comments. I'm going to save one of them for the end. But Dalton, one of the guys, I'll put it on the screen, Nate, he's like, hey, does Dalton do consults for multi-site church? So you might have a little business opportunity here, buddy.
I do.
Yeah.
I actually
So
do. Can I just plug my website? All of
go.
the 6-week thing I give away for free. I've actually had 250 worship leaders download my 6-week training.
Nice.
It's free at daltonshaffermusic.com. Totally free. There's a worship development tab. You can download the 6-week thing. I also do some like consultant, like if you had like a cohort of leaders that you'd want me to help train or train the leader who's going to train those leaders, I do some of that. And so you can reach out to me through that.
Great. Thank you. So daltonshaffermusic.com, and I'll link that in the description and show notes. I'd like to know if there's anything else in your 6-week process that you feel like we haven't highlighted. So you talked about the pre-work, the live meeting. You're kind of teaching and you're probably asking questions and
there's discussion questions baked into it. Yeah.
And then homework. Is there anything else that you feel like is worth covering in that 6-week process?
I would just say like you don't have to create all the content. One, you can get everything I've written for free. All the homework is like stuff from churches I trust and leaders I trust. Like I use Zach Hicks, the worship pastor, the week on gospel shaped service planning. We use his chapter, the worship pastor, as liturgical architect, and it kind of gives a framework. I'll use spiritual discipline books or spiritual leadership books. So Oswald Sanders has that book, Spiritual Leadership, that's really great. And so, find the resources that fit within your church context and theology, and like use those as homework. So it's stuff that your pastors always also trust. And then I would just say the week on developing a philosophy of worship is really designed for you and your pastor to get on the same page. And there's even questions in the homework that week. There's like 30 or 40 questions that you can answer that hopefully would help align you with your pastor. And so not to be done in isolation. These things should help you align with your pastor's kind of vision. And I'm really grateful. My lead teaching, we don't have a lead pastor, but we have 2 guys that function together in that role. But the teaching pastor who oversees me was the worship leader before, and just has so much alignment theologically and vision and philosophy that once you get that alignment, man, you can run fast and hard and freely without fear of button heads because you guys are in alignment. So do that with your pastor.
That's good. And I will share a little, this is a plug too for me, but a lot of people don't know this, that the Academy actually has group plan access as well. And like Andrew, who's watching, he's been part of it for 2 years. But basically what it means is for the price of basically 2 worship leaders, you can actually add unlimited worship leaders from your church to the Academy. So just if there are any multi-site churches out there or any churches that are trying to train up a lot of worship leaders or interns or whatever, you can put unlimited worship leaders into the Academy for like $70 a month. And you can get a private space in the Academy where you can send homework assignments like, hey, watch this video from Alex and watch this and do this thing. And let's discuss it here in our private chat channel. So if you didn't know that, it's also on our homepage, worshipministrytraining.com. So just letting the public know about that because most people don't. I don't really talk about it often. So cool. Any other final thoughts about this training of worship leaders before we dive into our Q&A?
Yeah, I would just say real briefly, I cannot overstate how much prayer really is the primary fuel for the pipeline. I do pray every day at 10:02. It's kind of a network-wide thing. We all pray for laborers. And so I pray for worship leader laborers because like nobody's praying specifically for that. So I do pray that every day that God would raise up people. And then on top of that, I have additional times throughout the week where I give intentional effort to pray for worship leaders specifically. I have a note card right there, like on my whiteboard, just posted that every time I see it, I stop and I pray, God, would you raise up worship leaders and start a movement of worship leaders? And so all the strategy in the world will not accomplish more than praying to the God who oversees everything in the world. And so I would just say, like, start by praying. I've been praying this prayer for years. And it really feels like in the last year, after 2 years of praying every single day, God just said yes. My bucket's not big enough to catch all of the rain of God saying yes to the prayers. But there was a lot of years of praying. And even before I came here, 3 years ago, years of wanting to see God raise up worship leaders. So I just cannot say it enough. Like, you have to pray for it if you want to see God do it. And he can do way more than you're even asking for. And so, yeah.
That is so good. I'm so glad you ended there. Do you mind, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you mind praying for the worship leaders watching live and those listening after the fact? And then after that, we'll jump into our Live Academy Q&A.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, Father, we just come with open hands. Like, every one of us wants to see you honored and worshiped rightly. And I agree with what Alex is saying, that there are not enough qualified worship leaders for how many churches need a worship leader. And so, God, we just ask, would you raise up laborers who love music, but love Jesus more than music, but love to use music to help people follow Jesus? And would you raise them up and send them out so that, God, that every church in America, every church in the world would have someone shepherding and stewarding the music and the worship of that church to honor you in every way that they can, that would shape people around the gospel and that would help people love and follow Jesus. And so, yeah, God, for all of our churches, would you continue to raise up people that you would use in that way? Amen.
And all the worship leaders all over the world said amen. All right, we're going to jump into our Live Academy Q&A. Hold tight, guys. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope this episode encouraged you, helped you, and pushed you forward in your ministry. If it helped you, can you take a second and help us by sending it to just one person that you think needs to hear this? And if you're feeling extra nice, leave us a nice, shiny 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or like this video if you're watching it on YouTube. If you want to discuss this episode or ask questions, we do have a free section in our academy where you can post comments and questions and chat with other worship leaders just like you, and also sample some of our courses. And you can go to worshipministrytraining.com/free to join us inside the free portion of the academy. If you're looking for more, check out the Full Access Academy. You can get 15 days for just $1 to start and try things out. Again, you can try all of it for 15 days for just $1 by going to worshipministrytraining.com. Hope to see you inside the academy, or else I'll see you next month for another helpful episode.